was taken. People were standing. The bus was absolutely jammed, and it was okay and it was cool because we didn't have any super predators on the bus. I mean, in Los Angeles, within 3 feet of a super predator, if you accidentally bump a super predator or some gangbanger, right, they're very likely to feel disrespected and get violent with you. It was easier to ride a bus absolutely jammed, standing room only. It was so jammed that an attractive young woman was forced to sit next to me. That's how jammed it was. And it's so much easier to be in physically uncomfortable spaces with people you like than in comfortable spaces with people you don't like. So when people talk to me about how beautiful Sydney is, or how beautiful Los Angeles is, or how San Francisco is, or Philadelphia, or Rio de Janeiro, to me it all comes down to the quality of your connections with people. Like, I got a lot of mates in Sydney, so that makes Sydney beautiful to me. I'd rather be in a cold place, an unscenic place, filled with my friends, than in the most beautiful place in the world where I don't have any connections. Like, everything comes down to the quality of the people. Like, Sydney's eastern suburbs in particular have good quality people. Like, everybody's nice. I'm asking for directions. I didn't have one unpleasant experience with anyone when I was in Australia for 2 months last year. So I've been in Australia for 4 days this time. No unpleasant experiences. I ask people for help. I get on absolutely jammed bus. Nobody seems stressed. Right? Stressed. I remember in America, everyone's talks about how they're stressed. Didn't see anyone looking stressed on a jammed bus. Like, no one seemed terribly uncomfortable, distressed, anxious. I mean, I have a lot of tendencies to anxiety, all right? And navigating my way around the city, particularly as I'm tired. I walked about 12 miles today. So I was getting tired and trying to find the bus and just asking for help, and didn't realize I needed to take a train and then get on the bus. But luckily, everyone's perfectly civil, perfectly nice, and there aren't any predators around of which I'm aware. Like, I'm not seeing trash, I'm not seeing graffiti. And it's easy to be on a bus that's absolutely jammed if people are decent and nice. I was on a plane. Every seat was taken. It was absolutely jammed, right? But in my row was this wonderful couple from Colorado who were incredibly nice and polite and thoughtful and considerate and kind and good. It's just a wonderful experience, right? I'd rather be jammed on a plane with people I like than have abundant leg room. Well, okay, I think I need to need to amend that. I've never flown first class. I think maybe I was. Yeah, I don't think I've ever flown. So maybe I would like to fly first class and just experience that abundant leg room. Just be able to tip the seat back and rest. So if I take the train up to Brisbane, I might splurge the extra $30 for the first class, reclining ticket, reclining seat. So it's $70 economy, $100 for one way train from Sydney to Brisbane. It's about a 12-hour ride through rural Australia, little towns in Australia, all up the coast. I hear it's not particularly scenic, but at least you're not going to be on board with super predators. So is web access costlier in Australia? To the best of my knowledge, nothing is costlier in Australia because 64 American cents make for one Australian dollar. So everything seems to be 20% cheaper in Australia. I'm getting so much bang for my buck. Right? I ride the bus, right? A $4 bus ticket is like $2.50 American. Right? I bought enough groceries for 2 weeks. Cost me 184 Australian, turns into 121 American. And with my Chase Amazon credit card, they're not adding any surcharge for my foreign transactions. So most credit cards I have, they ding you for foreign transactions, like they add like a 10% surcharge. That doesn't happen with my Chase card. So is web access costly in Australia? No. I did get an Australian SIM card, like 80 gigs of data for $40, and I can make international calls. I can just go to town. So by contrast, with my T-Mobile plan, I pay $50 for up to 30 days of 15 gigs, right? So a domestic plan, 80 gigs of data for a month, $40. T-Mobile, 15 gigs of data for $50, 30 days. Olivia Newton-John died. Did Australia melt down? No, she's not a big deal. So Australian tastes in popular music are they're more AC/DC than Olivia Newton-John. So Americans like softer, more mellow, pop music than Australians do. So Air Supply, Olivia Newton-John, these aren't big deals in Australia. Okay, let's have a look here. What else is in the comment section? I want to hide that light behind me. Does this give me like a saintly glow? 2 Cents says, great talking about contradictions in individuals. Yeah, like a lot of people think, oh, Apollonians, those are good people, or this ethnic nationalist, these are good people, or right. Good people are just good in certain situations. They're horrible in other situations. They're cowardly in other situations. They're nasty and dishonest in other situations. So talking about contradictions in individuals, our different impulses, seeing things from one day to the next, reminds me of the actor Michael McKean, who played Saul Goodman's brother, talking about this, saying people aren't just one thing. Yeah, people are very different in different situations. Yeah, Kanye West is shockingly discovering that being anti-Semitic is bad for business. Yeah, being publicly anti-black, anti-Mexican, anti-Chinese, well, I don't know about anti-Christian. I don't think that's true. So John Smith says Australia is only 57.2% European. I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I think it's much higher than that. So let's go to Wikipedia. Let's get some answers here. Boy, yeah, a little tired after 12 miles of hiking. Let's see. Okay, Australia has basically 3,000 square miles. What are the demographics? So, come on, where are the demographics here, mate? Ancestry and immigration. Okay, demographics. Okay, in the 2021 census, 33% of the population is from England, 9% from Scotland, 4% from Germany, 2% Greek, 1% Vietnamese, 1% Lebanese, 2% Filipino, 2% Dutch, 3% Aboriginal. That's greatly inflated. Like, people are incentivized to claim to be Aboriginal even if they're only 1/16 Aboriginal. 4% Italian, 5% Chinese, Australian 30%, Irish 10%. So yeah, it essentially breaks down to about 85% European. So Wikipedia entry says 57% European and 33.8% Oceanian, meaning Australians, right? So combine 57 and 33, you get 90%. So the population is about 17% Asian. So Australia is more than 80% European. But it's just so profound. You get on a bus, right? Jammed bus, and there's not stress, there's not anger, there's not antisocial behavior, there's not lashing out, there's not violence, there's not the threat of violence, there's not fare skipping. Much better to be on a jammed bus with good people than in a bus with abundant legroom, abundant space, but dangerous people. Bye-bye. I think Yellowstone's the #1 TV show in America. It's also very popular in Australia. So even in Woolloomooloo, mate. So critics don't respect it. but people love it. Incredibly compelling show. I mean, it's just gorgeous to look at, but apparently not woke enough for the critics. So my favorite way of judging whether I'm going to enjoy a TV show or a movie, aside from the genre, is what are its rankings on IMDb. So Rotten Tomatoes gives you the critical consensus, and IMDb gives you the people's consensus. G'day mate, 40 here. So I was just sitting down for my evening repast of toasted rye bread with an avocado on top, mashed up with some salt. And as I am wont to do in the evenings, I don't know how you like to spend your dinners, but I like to sit down and spend some quality time with the New York Times, just so that I can cut through the misinformation. Did you know that there's like a misinformation tsunami out there? So very concerning. Like, people are often consulting information that's not being approved by our elites, and it's just really mucking everything up. Very concerning. So I try to cut through the misinformation by settling in and having some quality time with the New York Times. And good thing I did this evening. Got some shocking news. Did you know that President Joe Biden, our president, at least Republicans don't say, he's not my president. Remember how Democrats used to do that about George W. Bush? He's not my president. God, so many Democrats were election deniers. He's not my president. So Joe Biden's my president. And did you know? Here's the shocking news. Joe Biden is confronting a polarized America. Did you know that? And it's absolutely no reason, has absolutely nothing to do with anything he said or done, right? It's not like there are 109 things that Joe Biden has done to polarize America. No, he's confronting a polarized America for no reason of his own, for no fault of his own. Uncle Joe, President Joe Biden, is confronting a polarized America for no fault of his own. Like, it's not like Democratic Party policies have done anything to polarize America. It's not like just despising middle Americans for clinging to their guns and religion has bred any resentment. It's not like Democrats' war on homeschooling and private Christian schools has done anything to breed that resentment. It's not like racial preferences, affirmative action has done anything to encourage that resentment. It's not like giving priority to oppressed people of color for access to COVID vaccines, right? It's not like that's done anything to polarize America, right? So you import the world, you import the third world, you then give preferential treatment to people from the third world, you stack the decks in their favor, and then breaking news, Joe Biden confronts a polarized America. Who would have thought that Uncle Joe, kindly, centrist, moderate Uncle Joe Biden, would be confronting a polarized America, right? But nothing in there about anything that Joe Biden might have done to polarize America, right? If 70,000 votes had gone the other way, Joe Biden would not have been president. He had the opportunity to govern as a centrist. Instead, he listened to a bunch of historians, quote-unquote historians who aren't real historians, like John Meacham. And he thought he wanted to be a transformational president more than Barack Obama. He wanted to be just like FDR. Instead, he experienced failure after failure after failure and polarized America. So I don't think a polarized America is primarily the fault of Joe Biden. It's not primarily the fault of Donald Trump. But when I was riding a crowded bus from Bondi Junction this evening, and there was almost no tension in the air, there's no fear, right? You know what it's like to ride public transport in large parts of Los Angeles or New York City or Washington, D.C. or Chicago. You know the fear that people experience. Well, there isn't any of that here in Sydney because they have not had an immigration policy that encouraged the importation of people you're very likely to fear on public transport. It hasn't encouraged the importation of people who like to defecate in public. It hasn't encouraged the importation of people who work for drug cartels. So, breaking news, top story in the New York Times, Joe Biden confronts a polarized America, but has absolutely nothing to do about Democratic Party policies that give racial preferences to certain groups, who work to make certain groups immune from criticism, right? You can't say anything critical about Jews as a group, about homosexuals as a group, about transsexuals as a group, about black people as a group, about brown people as a group, about, not sure, a little less intense, but certainly not encouraged to say anything critical of Asians as a group. Right? There are all these groups who are off limits from any kind of public criticism, in large part pushed through by a left-wing agenda, right, whose political party is the Democratic Party. Right? You might think that that might polarize people, all right? You don't have a whole heck of a lot of affirmative action in Australia, and Australia is not polarized. In Australia, in fact, in virtually no other country in the world of which I'm aware, do they force banks to extend loans to privileged groups whose test scores do not qualify them for loans. Right? In America, with the Community Banking Act of 1977, we forced banks to extend loans to all sorts of people in the inner city who are unlikely to pay back those loans. As a result, we got the 2008 global financial crash. Right? That was a direct result of the 1977 Community Banking, Community Reinvestment Act that forced banks to extend loans to people who are unlikely to pay them back. Right? By forcing banks to extend loans to people who are unlikely to pay them back, you think that might have contributed to a polarized America, where those people then got government subsidies, right, struggling to pay their mortgages, right? Irresponsible people struggling to pay their mortgages then get government subsidies under Barack Obama, and that kicked off the Tea Party, right? Tea Party was not thrilled with the extension of subsidies to people who'd proved themselves to be irresponsible. So Canada, Britain, Australia, France, Germany, they don't force banks to extend loans to people who are not worthy of credit. But the Biden administration is all for that. The 1977 Community Reinvestment Act legislated that. Republicans, by and large, gone along with it because they thought it was good for America, good for business to extend loans to people who are unlikely to pay them back. As a result, we tipped the entire world into a global devastating recession. Well, except for Australia. Australia didn't go into a recession, but everyone else went into a recession because we mandated that loans be extended to people who don't qualify for loans if those people are of a certain race. Right? You think that might promote polarization, where you tip the scales in favor of certain groups, which then correspondingly disfavors other groups? Think that might promote polarization? Like Harvard University says we never use race to discriminate. We just use race as a factor in promoting inclusion and diversity, right? When you promote the admittance of certain, protected groups of color with much lower test scores than other groups, yeah, you are racially discriminating, right? It's zero sum. Harvard can only admit, 500, 1,000, 1,500 new students a year. And if you admit students on the basis of race, students who would otherwise, in a colorblind admittance policy, would not be admitted into Harvard, you're doing that at the price of other people of a less favored race with higher academic qualifications. You think that might promote polarization? You think massive amounts of immigration from parts of the world that are not first world, that are not European, so radically increasing the amount of racial and religious and ethnic and cultural and ethical diversity, you think that might promote polarization? The New York Times presents it as, oh, it's just Uncle Joe. He's confronting a polarized America. Poor bloke. Not his fault. He's just doing the best he can, just like the Justice Department, just doing their best they can to try to bring a dangerous, out of control Donald J. Trump, to some kind of legal accountability. And it's that dastardly Donald Trump who's making things so awkward for the Department of Justice, who simply wants to pursue justice, 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 shall we pursue. That's all they want to do. And it's that nasty Donald Trump and the nasty Republicans who are throwing up obstacles for the Department of Justice pursuing justice. So sad. There's nothing they did, right? It's not like the Democrats did 109 things to increase polarization in this country, right? The more diversity you have, the more religious, ethical, cultural, tactical, psychological, racial, religious diversity you have, the more polarization you're going to have. No, it's not like all diversity creates equal amounts of polarization. Some types of diversity in certain circumstances are far more polarizing than other types of diversity. Sydney has tons of diversity, doesn't have a ton of nasty polarization. You feel safe walking the streets here. I'm alone at night in a park ranting about polarized America. I feel perfectly safe. There are people playing with their dogs in the park, right? Surely love is all around us. Right? It's a beautiful evening here because Sydney's diversity mix is not combustible into criminal violence. Now, it does take a toll. So residents of Sydney volunteer less than residents of other parts of Australia because Sydney is so diverse. People feel less public spirited. They feel less inclined to volunteer for people who don't look like them or sound like them or worship like them or have habits like them or values like them or cultures like them. People are going to be less likely to pitch in and help out such people. Oh, the other story that gets me is that Kyrie Irving got in so much trouble for one tweet to a documentary that Amazon makes money off of, right? From Hebrews to Negroes, right? That documentary, self-funded documentary that Amazon distributes. But Kyrie Irving is in massive trouble for making one tweet, since deleted, about that documentary. But Amazon has been showing it, still showing it, profiting from it. And if this movie is so horrible, why isn't there pressure on Amazon to remove it? Well, now there is pressure on Amazon. There wasn't 2 weeks ago. Right? This movie was perfectly kosher for Amazon to make money from. And Amazon has very strict policies against hate. So Amazon has like a Kindle Direct program where you can self-publish and make money. And they also have a similar program for filmmakers, where filmmakers, upload their movies and they can sell them or rent them through Amazon and make some money. But Amazon has policies against sexually explicit content in these movies and policies against copyright infringement and policies against hate. But someone at Amazon saw and approved this from Hebrews to Negroes documentary. Now, I give Amazon props for, generally speaking, being quite the free speech company. Amazon does not like to delete books. It's only started deleting books of Holocaust denial and some of the more spicy race realism books, like only in the last few years. So Google and Amazon and the big tech in general, Twitter, Facebook, these all started out as free speech playgrounds. And they didn't want to turn into repressive regimes where they had to hire thousands and thousands of moderators. Right? They were forced to do that by primarily Democratic politicians. And so big tech has reluctantly gone along. They're also forced to do it by advertisers. But Amazon and Google, prior to about 10 years ago, had a very enviable free speech record. Now Amazon is saying that they're going to add disclaimers to this documentary and disclaimers to the book. So I give Amazon props if they don't delete the movie and don't delete the book. So it costs $12 to rent the movie, like $50 to buy it. And so far it's only had like 1,200 rentals, even with all this controversy. But the ADL, you'll be glad to know, the ADL's on the case, pressuring Amazon to remove the listing, and if they don't remove it, to add all sorts of important disclaimers about how this is a work that promotes anti-Semitism and hatred. So thank God for the Anti-Defamation League out there, fighting against free speech. Oh, it's not free speech, it's hate speech. Right? Hate speech is not recognized in US law. It's an entirely subjective category. It's just kind of weird that Kyrie Irving got 100 times the amount of attention and criticism that Amazon got. Like, why did all the powers that be come down on Kyrie Irving, but they didn't come down on Amazon? Because Amazon has more power. They thought they could bully Kyrie Irving. They knew they couldn't bully Amazon. So people very quickly sense whether or not you can be bullied. And if you allow yourself to be bullied, people will bully you. They'll beat you down. They'll drag you through the mud. They'll deride you. They'll declaim you. They'll have contempt for you. They'll pour it on. Like, just unbelievably hostile, intense response to Kyrie Irving, but respectful, careful, nuanced responses to Amazon. Why? Because Amazon has the power. Kyrie Irving doesn't have the power. And people don't like Kyrie Irving. And so this is an opportunity to stick it to him. But why would Kyrie Irving get 100 times the criticism and the pressure that Amazon has received when Amazon hosted and made money from this supposedly evil anti-Semitic documentary?